the important part, as I said, the Prime Minister had to call a conference by March of 1983. So within the Native Council of Canada, we said, okay, we want to push forward for a land base and self-government for the Métis. And this is starting in about 1981-82. And by the time we got to March of 1983, well, January, February, March of 1983, we were told by the Native Council of Canada, whose president was a non-status Indian, the vice president is a status Indian, you may know him, Bill Wilson from this province, and the Secretary-Treasurer was a non-status Indian. So we were told, no, you're going to have to come up with a compromise position with the Indian people, and their position was basically either getting treaty rights or pursuing their Aboriginal rights or getting Indian Act status, totally different than what we were seeking. At the end of the day, in March of 1983, after the Assembly of First Nations and Inuit took off Métis land base from the Constitution agenda, we decided we had no alternative but to regroup as a people. And in March, about March the 7th or so, we formed the Métis National Council in Regina, the three prairie provinces. And also because we were excluded, because the Prime Minister was to invite representatives of the three peoples. And we said, when you invited the Assembly of First Nations, you invited the Indian people. When you invited the Inuit, to Peret Kanatami, you invited the Inuit people. So when you invited the Native Council of Canada, you certainly were not inviting the Métis people because we're not part of the Native Council of Canada. So we reached out a court settlement with the Prime Minister. We got our seat at the table on March 16th of 1983. So we regrouped at that time. We expressed ourselves and we defended our rights and our people. And at the time I was Vice President of the organization in Saskatchewan, so I became at that first March meeting the spokesperson, the national representative of the Métis National Council. So we were successful then in getting one seat where all the other organizations had two each. After that, we got equal seats, but we were saying, fine, one seat's enough for us because, we were one voice, one people. And so we got engaged and we went through this process. I won't go through all of that, but we continued fighting and we got on the agenda through the out-of-court settlement, on the agenda, the right to a land base and self-government. So at least we won in terms of the paper battle. We didn't secure it, but at least it got back on there, it got into the consciousness of the Canadian public because those four constitutional conferences in the 80s were publicly televised. So we were able to articulate our positions, our aspirations, and so on and so forth. And of course, as we went on, then the Métis Nation citizens in British Columbia came into the MNC, as did the Métis Nation citizens in Ontario. And so we've been building and building since then. What we haven't achieved as of yet is a Métis Nation Constitution, which sets this out. We had some struggles at the outset. I was one of the people that advocated that we're one people, one nation, we are a whole. But because of the fact that after 1870, after Manitoba was created, the small postage stamp province, we saw the fact that provincial boundaries dissected our homeland. And we have the fact that there are provincial governments and we need to deal with them. And so our organizations grew, Manitoba Métis Federation, Métis Nation of Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, Ontario. So we have the reality of living within provinces. And at the time, the provincial presidents were sort of strong and say, no, we are the sum of its parts, we're not the whole. So we have that balancing act that we still have to deal with today. Provincial jurisdiction, federal jurisdiction, in our case, governing member jurisdiction, and the national jurisdiction. But while it is a challenge, it's something we have to look at, because we say we are a nation and our culture knows no boundaries, as Mr. Hall will attest. Our language, our clothing doesn't stop at the Alberta-Saskatchewan border or the Alberta-BC border. I mean, our nation, our culture, our identity, our consciousness, we know no boundaries. So that's a reality we must deal with. So we went through the constitutional process in the 80s, then the 1992, was it, Charlottetown round? Yes, 1992. Gosh, it's been a while. And we got very close. We were able to strike up a deal with the 5 provinces, Ontario West, within which, we converge, our Métis Nation homeland and those 5 provinces, and the federal government. We had a side deal known as the Métis Nation Accord, and in it, there was an agreement to begin a land claim process. There was an agreement to start working on self-government, to finance self-government through tax arrangements, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, Canada had a referendum because Quebec was going to get its distinct society, Alberta was going to get its Triple E Senate, and others were going to get something. Everybody's going to get something. But Canada was asked, do you support the Charlottetown Accord? And they voted it down by about 52 to 48. So our accord went down with the national accord. And that's the last constitutional process we were ever engaged in. When we went forward, we said, as a people, we have the right of self-determination like any other people or nation in this world. The right of self-determination to determine for ourselves how we're going to govern ourselves. And we said we're going to the constitutional table on that basis as a people with rights to land and to be self-governing. And Section 35, we said, will be our fallback position because Section 35 talks about the Aboriginal treaty rights. And in terms of Aboriginal rights aren't as expansive as the international law right of self-determination, because when they first got here from overseas and planted their flags, they said, well, we claim this land as ours, but we realize, the indigenous peoples must have some kind of land rights or some kind of rights, but not a sovereign rights. These are ours. So that is a sort of a lesser right, but an important right.